Princess Alarave believed her human guard was ordinary because he tried so hard to look ordinary, and in a palace full of jeweled antlers, crystal armor, floating crowns, and nobles who perfumed their threats before speaking them. Sergeant Mason Hale seemed like a dull gray stone left in the center of a royal garden by mistake. He wore a plain black coat, kept his boots polished but never shining, stood one pace behind her left shoulder, and answered every insult with the same calm phrase. "Understood, Your Highness?" The court called him Earth Dust, Iron Peasant, Soft Skin, Borrowed Shadow, and sometimes, when they thought he could not hear, Temporary Meat Alara never corrected them, because she had not chosen him. Interstellar Accord had forced one Terran guard into her protection detail after the murder of her brother, and she had accepted Mason the way a drowning person accepts a rope made of thorns. Useful, humiliating, necessary, not beloved. He never complained, never boasted, never even explained why the Terran embassy had sent one man instead of a squad. He simply walked with her through marble corridors while alien cameras glittered like insects, watched the hands of servants, watched reflections in goblets, watched shadows under doors, and looked. To every eye in the Sapphire Court, like a tired soldier waiting for retirement, Alara decided he was harmless, perhaps brave in the small human way, perhaps loyal because Earth-like dramatic oaths, but ordinary, painfully ordinary, until the night assassins entered her sanctuary and began whispering his name like a prayer for mercy. The first warning came as music, not alarm. A single wrong note inside the Moonharp Orchestra during the Festival of Seven Crowns. Alara sat beneath the glass dome of the high atrium, surrounded by ambassadors, generals, priests, cousins who wanted her throne, and 300 guests pretending not to count how many guards stood between them and power. The moonharpists played from balconies shaped like silver wings, their fingers drawing light through strings made from frozen comet vapor, and every note spilled blue fire across the ceiling. Alara smiled because queens in waiting smiled even when grief had teeth inside their ribs. Her brother Prince Orin had died 40 days earlier, his shuttle cut apart above the northern sea, and every noble house had suddenly remembered ancient claims, ancient insults, ancient blood rights. Her mother, the reigning empress, had retreated into ritual mourning, leaving Alara to attend ceremonies, hear petitions, reject alliances disguised as marriages, and pretend the empire was not cracking under her feet. Mason stood behind her chair, hands folded, eyes low, looking almost bored. Lord Thalon of the Thorn House leaned close and said, "Your Highness, does the human sleep standing up? Or is that expression his species' version of thought?" Alara lifted her cup to hide a tired smile. "He thinks enough to keep breathing near people who underestimate him." Thalon laughed, soft and cruel, a guard who must be defended by his princess. How touching. Mason said nothing, and that silence irritated Alara more than the insult, because it made him seem obedient rather than proud. Then the wrong note came again, low, trembling. Nearly swallowed by the music, Mason's head tilted one finger width. He did not move otherwise, not at first, but Alara felt the air change around him, as if the ordinary man behind her had inhaled all the warmth from the room. She glanced up through the reflection on her wine cup and saw his eyes. No longer tired, no longer dull, focused on the third balcony, where a harpist's sleeve hung too heavy around the wrist. Alara whispered without turning. "Sergeant," he answered softly. "Your Highness, please set down the cup." "Why?" she asked. Because royalty asked why even when fear tightened the throat. "Poison on the rim," he said, and at that same breath his hand slid forward, 2 fingers touching the stem, not grabbing, not startling her, simply guiding the cup down before her lips touched death. Alira's pulse lurched, the orchestra swelled. Guests applauded some glittering flourish, and Mason leaned closer, voice nearly pleasant. "There are 12 in the room, maybe 13, the harpist, 2 serving twins, 3 balcony priests, 1 ambassador's aide for masked dancers, 1 under the west fountain, and someone above the dome glass." Alara forced her face still, because Pallas's daughters learned stillness before language. You are sure, Mason, yes, Your Highness? How long have you known? Since the first bell? Why did you not say? Because the exits were already theirs. That was when the palace became a cage. And the cage discovered it had locked itself around a human. Alara wanted to signal the Imperial Guard, but Mason's hand brushed the back of her chair twice. A warning, the guards nearest the dais were not hers. Not tonight, she realized with a cold little collapse inside her chest. They wore her colors, blue and gold, but Captain Illier had accepted duty rosters from House Thorn for the festival. And House Thorn smiled from every balcony. Mason stepped away from her by half a pace, almost lazy, as if adjusting position after too long standing still. A masked dancer spun near the dais, silver veil flying, and a needle flashed between two fingers. Mason caught the dancer's wrist without looking, folded the arm backward with a small economical turn, and placed the assassin gently into a bow that looked like choreography until the dancer's knees struck the floor. The needle vanished into Mason's sleeve. A second dancer lunged, blade open under the silk fan. Mason moved Alara's chair with his boot, not enough for anyone to notice. Just enough that the blade kissed empty air. His elbow rose, the assassin's throat met it. And the dancer crumpled without a sound. Applause thundered for the orchestra. Not for survival. Alara stared forward, smiling with frozen lips, while death fell around her like curtains. Mason murmured, "Stay seated, Your Highness. It will be more frightening if you run." "More frightening for me," she whispered. "More frightening for them," he said. The harpist on the third balcony pulled a coil gun from inside the false instrument. Mason took the poisoned wine cup and flicked it upward. The crystal struck the harpist's hand at impossible speed. The shot fired into the dome, moonglass cracked with a scream, and the crowd finally heard something wrong beneath the music. Several nobles turned, confused, annoyed, not yet afraid. A priest on the east balcony lifted both hands as if in blessing, and Mason's stolen needle left his sleeve, crossed 30 meters, and pinned the priest's wrist to a carved prayer rail. The priest shrieked, black blood running down holy robes. At the west fountain, water exploded as a figure rose beneath a cloak of bending light. Assassin armor turning visible in silver ripples. Alara saw a weapon shaped like a folded star aimed at her heart. And for the first time, she understood that Mason had not been standing behind her because protocol required it. He had been standing there because every angle in the room led through him. He pulled her down, shoved the heavy royal chair sideways, and the folded star fired. The chair burned through, gold collapsing like wet wax. Mason's coat smoked where the edge of the beam kissed his shoulder, but he did not grunt. He lifted a fallen dancer's fan, snapped it open, and threw it. The fan spun across the atrium, struck the invisible assassin's helmet, and folded itself into the breathing vents. The assassin stumbled, choking, hands clawing at his own mask. Then Mason smiled, not warmly, not cruelly, just sadly, and the assassins stopped pretending they had come to kill a princess. Asterisk, one by one, the disguised attackers shed their masks. The orchestra dissolved into screams. Nobles overturned tables. Guards drew weapons and aimed them everywhere except correctly, while above the dome, something heavy crawled across cracked glass. Alara felt Mason's hand close around her upper arm. Not hard, never hard, but certain. "Move now," he said. She rose, ducking beneath his shoulder as a dart storm hissed through the air where her head had been. Mason dragged a cloak from Lord Thalin's chair and snapped it around her, the fabric stiffening under impact as poisoned darts buried themselves in embroidered thorns. Thalon screamed about royal property, then saw a dart quivering one breath from his eye and collapsed under the table. Mason guided Alara through chaos. Not toward the main doors, not toward the guards, but toward the musician's stair. She protested once. "The safe room is east," he answered. "The east corridor smells like opened batteries. Breaching charges this way." The musician's stair was narrow, spiraling, lit by pearls of soft blue flame. Alara gathered her festival gown with both hands and ran, crystal slippers striking metal steps. Behind them came the assassins, no longer silent, no longer graceful, boots pounding, armor unfolding. Weapons charging with insect whines, Mason stayed below her on the stair, moving backward faster than most soldiers moved forward. His pistol appeared, ugly and matte black, against all the palace beauty. He fired 3 times. Each shot sounded small, almost rude. Each shot made an assassin fall. Not dead, Ilara noticed through terror. Knees shattered, hands opened, weapon joints broken. Precise wounds, disabling wounds. "Why are you sparing them?" she gasped. Because they may know who paid, Mason said. And because killing is loud in ways you cannot hear? A blade came around the curve of the stair. Mason caught the assassin's wrist, struck the elbow, twisted, and the blade clattered upward rather than down. He took it, reversed it, and tapped the assassin's throat with the flat edge. The armored figure froze, breathing hard behind a mirror mask. Mason said one word in a language Ilara did not know. The assassin dropped to both knees instantly. Hands open, blade forgotten, Ilara stumbled. "What did you say?" Mason pushed her onward. Old battlefield code. "Meaning," she demanded, "mercy request accepted if you stay down." Another assassin rounded the stair, saw the kneeling one, saw Mason, and stopped so suddenly the assassin behind crashed into him. The first lifted both hands, palms out, and spoke through a broken translator. "No contract names him. No contract said him." "No contract," said the grave shepherd. Mason's jaw tightened. "Keep moving, Your Highness." Ilara looked back at him. At the man everyone called ordinary. At the assassins beginning to tremble before him. "Grave shepherd," she repeated. "It is not a title I use," Mason said. "Then why do murderers use it for you?" "Because murderers remember who carries them off battlefields." The stairs ended at a service gallery above the festival kitchens. Hot air smelling of spice, steam, and panic. Servants crouched beneath preparation tables while palace guards shouted conflicting orders below. Mason cut left through a curtain of drying herbs, pulled a kitchen boy from the path of a charged bolt before it punched through the wall, and placed the child behind Ilara. "Protect him," he said. The absurdity nearly broke her. "I am the princess. Yes, and now you have someone to protect. Move." The boy clung to her sleeve, shaking, and Ilara moved. Because Mason's command did not insult her the way court commands did. It assumed she could be useful. They crossed the kitchen roof bridge, a narrow, transparent span over the inner gardens. Moonlight poured through the damaged dome in fractured shards. Alarm bells finally screamed. Late and useless, the bridge sealed behind them. Then ahead of them, blue doors slamming down. House Thorn security glyphs flaring across the glass. Ilara's heart fell. They trapped us. Mason examined the glyphs. They trapped themselves. From the garden shadows below, 6 assassins rose on grav belts, black armor opening like beetle wings. Their leader floated higher than the rest, helmet shaped like a mourning bird. Long rifle aligned with Mason's chest. The voice that emerged was soft, female, and furious. "Terran, stand aside and live." Mason looked at Ilara, at the boy, then at the leader, and said, "You are late." The leader hesitated. "Late." Mason raised his pistol and fired once into the bridge beneath his own feet. The glass did not break. It sang. The sound traveled down the transparent span into hidden security veins, met the locked glyphs, and returned as white fire. Every thorn seal shattered at once. Doors burst open at both ends. The levitating assassins below convulsed as their grav belts overloaded. And Ilara realized Mason had not fired a bullet. He had fired a frequency, something tuned for memory, something no ordinary guard should know about. A palace built 3,000 years before humans reached the stars. The assassins slammed into the garden pools, armor sparking. Ilara ran with the kitchen boy toward the open door. Mason followed, limping slightly now, shoulder bleeding through his coat. The boy saw it and whimpered, "You are hurt, sir." Mason gave him a quick glance. Then I must not waste the pain. The corridor beyond the bridge was lined with statues of dead emperors. each holding a crystal blade and a history written by winners. Ilara had walked that corridor since childhood, reciting names, victories, bloodlines, but tonight the statues looked ashamed. Their polished faces watched Mason take point before the princess they were supposed to protect. He checked corners with the patience of a man who had seen death hide in kinder places, and Ilara hated that she had once mistaken patience for emptiness. They reached the Hall of Petitions, a vast chamber of floating benches where citizens begged the crown for justice once a month. It should have been empty. Instead, it was full of imperial guards kneeling in silence, hands bound behind their backs, helmets removed, faces bruised. At the center stood Captain Alir, Ilara's chief guard, alive, bleeding, ashamed, and behind him, a semicircle of assassins wearing no masks now. Their species varied, scaled, feathered, chitinous, pale. Beautiful, monstrous, but all wore the same black throat mark, the sign of the Veil Knives. Killers so expensive that only a throne, a syndicate, or a terrified noble coalition could afford them. The Morning Bird leader descended from an upper balcony, water still dripping from damaged armor. Clever, Terran? But the game ends in this room. Ilara lifted her chin. Because you have hostages, the leader laughed. Because we have history, little princess. Empires fall when heirs die in public confusion. Everyone mourns, everyone accuses, and the highest bidder inherits stability. Mason stepped forward, pistol lowered, a bad plan. The leader's helmet opened, revealing a narrow face with violet scars. And suddenly her expression changed, recognition widening into disbelief. No, she whispered, you died at Caro's gate. Mason said, many people did. She backed one step before rage recovered her. The grave shepherd did not carry a royal leash. I carry what I choose, Mason said. And the killers who had come for a princess realized they were trapped in a room with the man who had once saved their enemies. Ilara did not understand why the words changed the assassins more than weapons had, but they did. A scaled killer near the hostages lowered his blade a fraction. Another touched the black mark at his throat. An old fear passing through professional discipline, the leader spat. Do not kneel to legend. He is flesh. Flesh bleeds. Mason nodded. Flesh bleeds. That is why this ends now, she smiled sharply. You think you can frighten us with mercy stories? Human, we have killed kings who owned moons. I know, Mason said. You killed King Ravel in his sleep. Chancellor Ohm, in a temple bath, the three heirs of Caldron, by poisoning their shared womb tank. You are efficient, political, patient, and very proud of clean exits. He looked up at the balconies. Then, down at the polished petition floor. But tonight you rushed. The leader's eyes narrowed. Mason continued. You started the attempt before the fourth moon crossed the dome. Because your inside sponsor panicked, your palace maps are outdated. Your bridge override was thorn-branded. Your poison was court-made, not guild-made. And your come silence began 8 seconds after Lord Thalen left his seat. Ilara's breath caught, Lord Thalen, hiding under a table. Cowardly Lord Thalen, with jokes like perfume overwrought, the leader's mouth hardened. Names are not proof, Mason said, no, but fear is. He turned his head slightly toward the bound guards. Captain Ilir, can you stand? Ilir swallowed blood. For my princess, yes. Mason's voice softened. Then on my mark, fall sideways. Not forward, Ilir blinked, confused, but obeyed before understanding. Because command, real command, did not need shouting. Mason lifted his empty left hand, fingers spread, and Ilara saw the assassin leader's gaze snap to the motion. Expecting a weapon, Mason said. Mark, every bound guard threw himself sideways. The polished petition floor opened in a ring of blue light beneath the assassins. Not a trap Ilara knew, not a royal security measure, but an old citizen emergency shield designed to protect petitioners from tyrant guards. Forgotten beneath ceremonial carpets for centuries, Mason had noticed the seam. Of course he had noticed. The shield erupted upward, splitting the room into curved compartments, separating assassins from hostages, blocking rifle lines, bending blades aside. Ilara grabbed the kitchen boy and dropped his energy howled overhead. The room became a maze of translucent walls, reflections, screams, and Mason moved through it like he had been born in the fracture between seconds. A Katana's killer burst through a weakening shield segment and aimed at Mason's back. Before Ilara could shout, 3 other assassins cried out first. "Grave Shepherd behind you," Mason ducked. Not surprised, the shot passed over him and struck the leader's shoulder armor. She snarled at her own people. Traitors, one of them. The kneeling assassin from the stair raised trembling hands, not traitors, debtor souls. Ilara saw then that several killers had stopped attacking fully. Not surrendering, not helping, but hesitating at the edge of an older law than coin. The leader saw it too, and desperation made her uglier than cruelty. She ripped a black capsule from her throat mark and crushed it. A pulse rolled through the room, and the hesitant assassins screamed. Their armor locked, joints twisting. Forcing their weapons up, puppet failsafe, Mason said. And for the first time, Ilara heard anger in him. Not hot, not loud, worse, focused. The leader grinned through pain. The guild owns what it buys. Mason's face changed. He stepped over a fallen blade, picked up a coil gun, and removed the power cell without looking. "No," he said, "people are not weapons. They are when they sign the mark." The leader hissed. Mason lifted his eyes. "Then I will break the mark." This was the moment Ilara stopped seeing a guard and began seeing the reason battlefields told stories. Mason threw the dead power cell into the air and shot it with his last pistol round. The cell burst into a spray of blue sparks, harmless by itself, until it touched the petition shield and scattered through every curved wall. The pulse struck the assassin's black throat marks, not killing them, not burning them, but overloading the command circuits embedded under skin. One by one, puppet armor unlocked, weapons dropped, killers collapsed, clutching throats, sobbing, cursing, breathing free. The leader screamed and lunged at Mason with a blade drawn from inside her own bone. Fast enough that Ilara saw only a white arc. Mason stepped into it again, always into danger. His left forearm took the blade through flesh. He trapped the weapon there, teeth clenched, and placed his right hand against the leader's chest plate. Something clicked, small and final. The leader froze. Looking down at a thumb-sized charge attached over her heart, Mason said, "That is a shaped breacher. It will open your armor and leave you alive if you hold still. Move too quickly, and it will think you are a door." The leader's face went gray. "You would not," Mason said. "I would rather not." That difference confused her more than cruelty would have. Around them, assassins began crawling away from the fight. Some with hands raised, some whispering old battlefield words. Some begging, not for their lives exactly, but for him to remember them as lives. "Mercy, Shepherd," one gasped. "I carried water at Kuros. I was a child." Mason looked at him, I remember. "Stay down," another, a scarred, reptilian woman, pressed her forehead to the floor. "My brother was on the plague moon. You dragged him from the red trench." "Please, not the dark cells." Mason's voice was rougher now. "No dark cells if you surrender." The leader trembled with hatred. "Listen to yourselves. Assassins begging a guard." Mason did not look away from her. No. Assassins begging not to be turned back into tools. Ilara stood slowly, pistol hanging at her side. Gown torn, crown tilted, blood not hers across one cheek. And every eye in the Hall of Petitions turned toward her. She realized with a terror stranger than assassination that she could say anything and history would build itself around the words. Her mother had ruled through ceremony. Her father through treaties, her brother through charm. Ilara had not known what remained for her. Now Mason was bleeding at her feet. Enemies were kneeling, her guards were watching. And the Empire was waiting to learn whether she understood mercy as weakness or power. She raised her voice, by authority of the Sapphire Crown. "Any assassin who drops weapons, disables armor, releases hostages, and names the sponsor of this attack will be granted royal custody, medical treatment, and trial under public witness. Not house justice, not guild justice. royal witness. Captain Alir stared at her as if she had become taller. The bound guards repeated the order down the room. The assassins looked between Alara and Mason, and something broke. Not courage, perhaps despair. Perhaps loyalty to coin. Perhaps the loneliness of people who had never expected a target to offer law. Weapons hit the floor one after another. Metal rained on polished stone. The leader laughed, ragged and disbelieving. "You think law saves you, princess? Law is a candle in a storm." Alara stepped closer. Voice shaking but clear, "Then we hold the candle closer." Mason's eyes flicked to her, and for the first time since she had known him. Approval touched his face, small, weary, devastatingly human. The leader saw it and sneered, touching. "The ordinary guard trains the royal pet." Alara lifted the pistol. But Mason's hand, still impaled, shifted slightly. "No." Not because the leader deserved mercy, but because Alara did. She lowered it, the leader whispered, weak. Mason answered for her, "No, expensive. Mercy always costs more." Then the west doors exploded inward. Not from assassins, not from the veil knives, but from palace security walkers bearing the crest of House Thorn. 6-legged machines plated in ceremonial gold, their eyes burning red with illegal war cores. Lord Thalon had stopped hiding. Alara understood. The assassins were only the knife. Thorn was the hand. The first walker fired into the room without caring who stood in the way. A surrendered assassin vanished behind a burst of white impact. Not dead only because Mason shoved him sideways while falling himself. The shaped charge on the leader's chest blinked faster as she stumbled. Mason caught her armor strap and hauled her down behind a bench. Saving the woman trying to kill him from the machine sent by her sponsor to erase witnesses, she stared at him, utterly lost. He grimaced. "Hold still. Remember the door problem." Alara dragged the kitchen boy behind the petition shield control plinth. Captain Alir and his guards, still partly bound, threw themselves toward fallen weapons. The walkers advanced, flattening benches, firing suppression beams, their speakers broadcasting Lord Thalon's voice. Distorted and theatrical in this tragic hour, House Thorn mourns the attempted murder of our beloved princess and the unfortunate corruption of her Terran guard. Alara bared her teeth. "He is accusing you." Mason pulled the blade from his arm with one hard breath. "He is confessing too loudly. Help me stand." She did, and felt how heavy he was, how much blood warmed his sleeve. Ordinary men bled, legends bled. That was the terrible thing. Mason leaned on her for half a second, then stepped away before pride could make it sentimental. "We need the walkers alive enough to prove ownership." Alara looked at the machines shredding the room. "Alive enough," she repeated. "They are machines, Your Highness. In politics, machines are witnesses with legs." Mason answered, the leader of the assassins. Still kneeling under the threat of the breacher, barked a laugh that became a cough. "Release me, Shepherd. I can cut their knees." Mason looked at her. "You will run," she snarled. "I will survive." Different sentence, same direction. Mason said. Alara said, "Give her a chance." Mason's eyes flicked to her again. Measuring, not obedience, not doubt. Respect, negotiating with risk. Then he touched the charge and removed it. The leader froze as freedom arrived unexpectedly. Mason handed her the bone blade hilt first. "Betray us, and I will be disappointed," he said. She blinked. Somehow that frightened her more than the bomb. "My name is Vexa," she muttered. Mason nodded. "Mason, I know," she said, and launched herself at the nearest walker. The battle became impossible to remember cleanly afterward, because it was not one battle but many. Alara saw Captain Alir rally guards with wrists still bleeding from cords, saw surrendered assassins choose sides one heartbeat at a time, saw Vexa slide beneath a walker and carve open its knee cables while cursing Housethorn in 6 languages, saw Mason limp through beams and blades as if pain were weather he had promised to ignore. He did not command like nobles. He did not say glory, honor, bloodline, destiny, he said. Left, down, breathe. Stay with me. Shield him. Not there. Good. Again. And people obeyed because every word arrived exactly when needed. A walker cornered 3 palace servants behind a fallen petition bench. Its war corps charging for a killing sweep. Mason had no gun, no blade. Only a broken harpstring from the earlier orchestra still tangled around his wrist. He wrapped the comet string around both hands, ran toward the machine. And Alara screamed his name. He slid under the beam. The floor behind him, boiling into glass, looped the string around the walker's front leg, and let the machine's own turn tighten the wire until the gold-plated limb cut through itself. The walker crashed. Mason climbed it like a miner scaling a cliff, punched through the maintenance iris with his bleeding arm, and tore out a memory crystal the size of his thumb. He tossed it to Alara. Evidence. She caught it against her chest. Shaking with rage, fear, and the unwanted urge to laugh, because the universe had become absurd, her ordinary guard was dismantling treason with a harpstring. That was when Alara understood the difference between obedience and loyalty. Obedience waited for permission. Loyalty recognized the person worth protecting. Lord Thalon entered after the 4th walker fell, wearing mourning white and battlefield arrogance, surrounded by private soldiers in thorn armor. His face was pale with fury under ceremonial paint. "Your Highness," he called, "please step away from the corrupted Terran and the guild animals." For your safety, Alara stood amid broken petition benches, torn gown trailing, stolen pistol in one hand, evidence crystal in the other, and found she was no longer afraid of his voice. "Lord Thalon," she said, "you attempted regicide, hired the Veil Knives, compromised palace rosters, murdered loyal guards, and activated illegal war corps inside the Hall of Petitions." Thalon smiled sadly for the crowd of survivors. "Grief has confused you, Princess. Everyone saw the human attack the festival. Everyone saw assassins kneel to him. Everyone will understand that Earth staged this chaos to seize influence." Mason walked to Alara's side, slower now, blood marking each step. Thalon's smile widened. "Look at him. A foreign soldier covered in royal blood, surrounded by killers who call him master." Mason's eyes stayed flat. "If I were their master, Thalon, you would already be apologizing." The noble's smile twitched. Alara almost laughed, because Mason said it without drama. Without threat, like a weather report, Thalon lifted one hand, and his private soldiers aimed at Mason, not at Alara. Never at Alara while witnesses watched, but at the disposable human. Captain Eler tried to step in front of him. Mason pushed him back. "No. Thalon needs this shot clean," Alara whispered. "Mason." He answered softly, "Your Highness." Sometimes traps require bait. She hated him then for being willing. Hated herself for understanding too late. Thalon spoke loudly. "By emergency authority of House Thorn, I order the execution of the compromised Terran asset." Fire, the soldiers fired. And Mason vanished. Not truly, Alara's mind knew, but he moved before the command ended. Dropping through a hole blasted earlier in the petition floor, one he had measured with a glance. Beams crossed empty air and struck the last standing walker behind him. Overloading its war core, the machine screamed, staggered, and its internal recorder broadcast every command from the past hour onto the hall's emergency witness system. Lord Thalon's own voice filled the chamber. "Kill the princess only after the human is blamed. Eliminate guild survivors. Purge a liar. Secure the Empress. House Thorn ascends by dawn." The words echoed from wall to wall, impossible to perfume. Impossible to deny. The hall went silent, and in that silence, treason lost its crown. Thalon's soldiers lowered their weapons by instinct. But Thalon was a noble raised on entitlement. And entitlement often mistakes exposure for inconvenience. He drew a ceremonial blade from his sleeve and lunged at Alara, screaming something about blood purity, stolen thrones, alien contamination. She saw him coming, saw the blade, saw his eyes full of the childish fury of a man denied ownership of the world. She lifted the pistol, but her fingers were slick, her aim uncertain. And Mason was still below the broken floor, too far to hurt. Too human, then Vexa moved, the assassin leader. Wounded, furious, newly free, she caught Thalon's wrist and bent it until the blade fell. He shrieked, "Guild filth! Vexa smiled with blood on her teeth. "Witness," she said, and punched him in the throat hard enough to end the speech. Not the life, Thalen collapsed, choking, alive, humiliated. Surrounded by evidence and enemies he had purchased badly, Mason climbed from the hole with difficulty. One hand pressed to his ribs, he looked at Thalon. Then at Vexa, "You held back." Vexa spat aside. "You said witnesses matter?" Mason nodded. "They do." Ilara should have ordered Thalen seized. Should have thanked Captain Alir. Should have called her mother. Should have done 1,000 royal things instead. She crossed the broken hall and caught Mason as his knees finally weakened. He tried to apologize for falling, which made her so angry she nearly cried. "Do not," she said, voice cracking. "Do not say, 'Understood.' Do not say, 'You are fine.' Do not pretend bleeding is a duty." Mason leaned against the petition plinth. Pale now, ordinary again, in the worst way. Fragile bone and exhausted breath, Ilara pressed her hands over the wound in his side, warm blood slipping between her fingers. Around them, guards secured Thalen. Medics rushed in. Surrendered assassins were bound gently under royal order. And the kitchen boy stood guard over them with a soup ladle like a ceremonial spear. Mason noticed. Of course he noticed. "Good stance," he murmured. The boy stood straighter. Ilara let out a broken laugh. "Are you incapable of fearing death?" Sergeant Mason looked at her. "I fear it constantly. That is why I pay attention," she swallowed. "Then why did they beg you for mercy?" He closed his eyes for a moment because years ago, at Caro's Gate, I was assigned to body recovery after a war no one wanted to claim. The veil knives had been used as disposable shock troops. Children, debtors, prisoners, assassins in name only. Their employers left them in plague trenches when the line broke. Earth sent medics, not because they were innocent, but because they were alive. I carried whoever I could. Enemy, ally, monster, child. I told them if they stayed down, I would get them home. Some lived, some remembered, Ilara whispered, Grave Shepherd. Mason flinched slightly. I hated that name. Why? Because shepherds choose flocks. I was just the one who kept walking. She looked around the hall. At guards alive because he kept walking. Assassins surrendered because he kept walking. A princess breathing because he kept walking. Ordinary, she thought, and the word changed shape completely. The medics tried to take Mason from her, but he caught Ilara's wrist before they lifted him. Not hard. Never hard. Your Highness Housethorn will move on the Empress. The North Lift, private shrine level, 3 loyal guards only. Thalen would need her signature or her body before dawn. Ilara's grief and fear sharpened into command. Captain Alir, secure the hall, preserve every witness. No private interrogations, Vexa. If you want royal custody instead of a revenge cell, tell my people every thorn root, you know? Vexa stared. You trust me? No, Ilara said. I trust your hatred of being owned. Vexa's smile was thin and real. Fair. Mason's fingers slipped from Ilara's wrist. He tried to rise again. Absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely human. She pushed him back with both hands. You are done standing, Sergeant. Mason blinked at her tone, then, astonishingly, obeyed, understood, Your Highness. Ilara leaned close. If you die, I will consider it desertion. A corner of his mouth lifted. Harsh command. Effective command, she said, and walked away before tears could make her less useful. By dawn. Housethorn's banners were lowered across the capital. Not burned, Ilara ordered that deliberately. Because burned banners made martyrs, lowered banners made evidence. Lord Thalen was dragged before public witness in the same hall of petitions he had tried to turn into a tomb. The surviving veil knives testified under royal protection, some shaking, some defiant, some unable to look away from the med bay doors where Mason lay under surgical light. The Empress appeared beside Ilara, frail but crowned, and announced a tribunal, not a purge, which angered half the court and terrified the guilty half far more. Because purges were simple, tribunals asked questions. Mason slept through most of it, which became another scandal. Nobles whispered that the Terran had performed ancient combat rites. impossible tactical calculations, forbidden psychological warfare. Perhaps even low human sorcery. Alara heard them and almost told the truth. That he had listened to a wrong note. Noticed poison, protected a child, spared enemies. Trusted a princess to become more than decorative. And refused to let murderers be murdered when they became inconvenient. But courts understood sorcery better than decency, so she let them tremble 3 days later, when Mason woke fully. Alara visited the medbay without crown or procession, only a plain blue coat and 2 guards who waited outside because she told them to. He lay surrounded by machines shaped like silver flowers. His skin, too pale, one arm sealed in regenerative glass, ribs wrapped in translucent braces, and still, somehow, his boots sat aligned beneath the bed. Polished but not shining, he opened one eye, Your Highness. If you say understood, I will throw something. She said. He considered this, then said, acknowledged. She laughed before she could stop herself, and the sound seemed to surprise both of them. For a moment, they were not princess and guard, not witness and legend. Only 2 exhausted people alive after a night designed to end them. Alara pulled a chair beside his bed. The assassins are in custody. Medical treatment as promised. Vexa has given 6 names and asked whether disappointment still applies if she escapes after trial. Mason sighed. Tell her yes, Thalen. She continued, We'll face public tribunal. My mother has resumed authority. Though she is letting me speak more than before, the court has requested your removal. Naturally, Mason said. They claim you are destabilizing. Also naturally, they fear you. Good. Alara studied him. Do you enjoy that? No, he said. I prefer being ignored. She thought of every insult she had allowed to pass. Every moment she had mistaken restraint for dullness. I am sorry. Mason turned his head toward her. For what? For thinking ordinary meant small? He was quiet long enough that she feared she had offended him. Then he said, Ordinary is not an insult where I come from. Your Highness, ordinary people hold doors during evacuations. Give blood, learn names. Sit beside hospital beds, carry strangers. Ordinary is what civilization is made of. The rare ones break things loudly. The ordinary ones keep the world from staying broken years later. Enemies of the Sapphire Crown would still tell the story incorrectly. They would say the human guard revealed hidden powers, that he was a death saint, a war ghost, an assassin king, a monster disguised in skin. They would say Princess Alara survived because Earth had sent its deadliest creature to frighten the stars. But those who had been in the Hall of Petitions knew better. The assassins had not begged him because he was cruel. They begged because he had once carried them when no one else would. They begged because his mercy had memory, because his restraint was not weakness, because his ordinary human hands had done the impossible work of refusing to let hatred decide who deserved to live. And Alara, who had once looked at him and seen a dull gray stone, kept him at her side for every hard year that followed, not as a leash, not as a symbol, not as a borrowed shadow, but as proof that the universe often hides its strongest miracles inside people who do not announce themselves. And whenever some new enemy looked at the quiet human guard and made the old fatal mistake, Alara would remember the night killers fell to their knees. Remember Mason bleeding and still choosing witnesses over corpses. Remember the palace becoming a cage around the wrong prey. And she would almost pity them, because they thought mercy meant softness. They had not learned what assassins learned too late. A human who knows the cost of killing, and still chooses mercy, is not harmless. He is the last warning before the stars run out of chances.